If you're planning to retire, you're going to be bombarded with a million different questions. Things are going to be coming at you left and right. And they're all going to be questions about, well, what if this, or what do you have this, or all of these financial related questions make retirement difficult. So to make it a little easier, I'm going to boil it down to the top 5 that you need to consider. I'm going to bring my co-host in here. Tony, welcome to the show. I want to go through 5 questions that people need to get answered before they can retire, or as they're retiring. These are the 5 things they need to make sure that they are able to come up with a reasonable answer for, even if it's a yes or no or a loose answer. At least having some sort of answer is better than nothing. What do you say we go through them? And you could tell me whether or not you think these are good questions, or if you have an answer, or anything.
Yeah. Well,
because
first I want to
go ahead.
First, I want to address to the people who view the show and don't just listen. They're viewing it on YouTube. If it appears I've been crying, Dan was mean to me before the show. No, if it appears I've been weeping, it's because Dan's mean to me before we go live, and then he's all nice and. No, I'm kidding. And I just want to address that I do kid a lot on the show, and we did have a comment on, I believe it was last week's show or one of our previous week's shows, and I always joke about pizza, and that's going to come up again today. But somebody was concerned that I said pizza was a reason that I had been denied health care or health coverage from an insurance company because I eat too much pizza. That was a joke.
Is it, Tony? Is it?
Well, in a way it is. If you eat too much pizza, it can affect your health, and therefore you could be denied coverage because you're not healthy. So in a way it's true, but it was a joke. So
we will come back to that. We will come back to that later on in the show.
All right. But top 5 retirement decisions.
Yes. Okay. Questions. So these are the questions you're going to have an answer for.
Oh, okay.
If you want to retire successfully. Now, you can get by without answering these, but I want to boil it down to 5. So let's start with the first one, and that is, where will you live? Simple question in a way, but the answer might be complex. Where are you going to live in retirement? And I start with this one, and they are in some sort of order because it helps to have order, but any of these questions you can come to at a different time. But where you're going to live is an important thing to decide. And for many people, the answer is easy. I live here, and that's where I'm going to retire.
Yeah.
But there's always some wild cards that get thrown in the mix. Things such as, where are my grandkids going to be? Do you want to follow them? We did a show, I'll put it up here for the viewers on YouTube, on the actual cost of living in different spots. And does it really make a difference if you live in urban versus rural? That's an interesting factor into where you're going to live, is how much is it going to cost? Obviously, geographic location. People will love you, Tony. We're strongly considering, in a serious way, moving to Key West as a retirement dream, right? So geographic location.
Right.
And so when I ask these people that, when people come to me and they want help with retirement, I ask, where you're going to live. It's kind of brushed off as, but I'm asking more about, where do you see yourself moving, or do you want to stay? And then if they say we're going to stay in the house, it's like, well, is it someplace where you can actually age in place without any issues? Take your father, for example, and your grandfather. They lived on a farmhouse.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What would you say was, if you asked your parents where they were going to live, what they would say to this question?
Well, I think that most people do say, hey, I want to stay right here. And I think that's a pretty common thing. And most people will say that they'll stay right where they're at until they can't. And so why worry about that? And what do you say to that?
Well, the answer to the question where I'm going to live is most likely going to be, I'm going to stay in place. But I'll follow up with, well, is that home readily, is it available to, or is it amenable to aging in place gracefully? Or will you have to factor in some maybe home improvements or retrofitting the house? And if you had to, would you still want to stay here? So And some people might say, well, I'm fine here until this point, and then I will move, which is fine. But this is why I start with this question, because if you want to retire successfully, housing is probably the biggest decision point, because it's the biggest expense, or it's where you spend most of your time.
Right.
So be prepared for that question and go beyond just, well, I'm going to stay here forever. Think about, what does that look like? And I think people are getting that as they see their parents aging.
Plus, it plays into your financial aspect. Your, retirement income plan has to take into account the cost of where you're going to live. Are you going to have to buy a new house? I mean, downsizing actually can cost money.
Right.
People think they're going to save money by downsizing, but in the immediate, it might add some expenses.
Right. Second question. How will you live? I will live gracefully, Tony. No, this is more about the lifestyle. So, and this is probably the hardest question for people to answer, because they just don't know. And so I put it up here because it is important to answer. And basically everything else kind of flows from here. We've done shows on how much do you need at age 50, or how much is it cost to retirement? How do you not run out? All these things you can't answer until you answer this, which is, how are you going to live? What are you going to spend? Do you have a budget? Do you have any idea of what you're spending and what kind of spending you want to do? Do you want to travel? Do you want to go out to dinner every night? Do you want to renovate your kitchen or house? These are the questions that people are going to have to answer if they want to figure out retirement.
Right. And I think that's really, obviously, that's hugely important. And, but, I don't know, people, that's kind of ambiguous, don't you think, Dan? Retirement lifestyle. I mean, what do you mean? What's the cost of your retirement lifestyle? Isn't that just a way of saying retirement income, that figuring out what your retirement income will need to be?
Well, that's what most people do. So if I ask this question, what do you envision doing? Some people don't have a clue, right? Some people know exactly what I want to do. I want to move here and I want to do this, this, and this. But for the most people, they don't know. They've never done it. So what we do is we back into it. They say, all right, well, I don't necessarily know what my lifestyle is going to be or how much that's going to cost. That's what I'm hiring you for, Dan. So then we do, we start with, well, what do you have? How much income can I generate at a certain level of risk and then what lifestyle can I live based on that? So if you're saying, but I start with this because I don't want people to not spend, because we just did shows on this. I don't have enough. Well, do you have? I think you might have enough. People don't spend because they're afraid. But if I start with, what do you want to do, and then see if it can be done, as opposed to when I ask this question, what kind of lifestyle do you live? Well, how much can I afford? I don't like doing it that way. I will. And that sometimes happens because people just don't know how to commit or don't know what they want. So it's like, well, here's $5,000 a month. Do what you want with that. Oh, well, I could do a lot with that. I'd rather them say, this is what I want to do, and then make it happen. With the least amount of risk possible. Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
that's good.
This is the hardest question to answer. This is because there's a lot to this.
Sure. Obviously, this one is the most detailed, and it's the biggest part of what you do to help your clients, right?
And it changes over time. The different phases of retirement, different spending. You like to use the retirement smile spending. So you start up here and you spend a lot early, and then it drifts down, and then it increases again when you actually get older and healthcare goes up. But for the most part,
the go-go, the slow-go, and the no-go years, the
exactly,
3 stages. Exactly. Yeah.
And the spending usually is upfront. But
yes.
So the lifestyle question is, it is ambiguous, but this is where you can dream and think about it, but know that it changes over time. So right. This is, temporary, but you need to have some idea of what you're spending, or else you may never retire because you're too afraid, or you may make mistakes early that are irreparable. So it makes sense to be able to at least try and answer that question. Okay. Question 3. This is something that people don't think about until they have to. And we just did the show on this last week, which is, how are you going to be insured? what kind of insurance are you going to need? And particularly health insurance. I'll put the show we did last week on this, because most of your life, you don't have to think about it because you get it through your employer. Or like life insurance, you don't think about because it's just a multiple of your salary through your employer. Long-term care insurance, you don't think about because you're not old. But now you're getting to that point where you're retiring and you have to think about these things. You have to answer these questions because they're a huge expense, particularly health insurance. Medicare, what does that mean? You need to know what Medicare plan you're going to go on. You need to know what your health insurance is going to be, because that could be the one thing that derails your retirement, a medical expense that you're not prepared for. How are you going to be insured? Is this really a top 5 question? Absolutely. Because it's a huge medical expense. And I'm sure you can rant about that. And you always seem to rant about medical expenses.
Well, yeah, I think this is a big one. I'd put this one probably number 1. I mean, and everyone assumes, I think the problem is, and for a lot of our listeners, is that they assume Medicare will cover they don't need to worry about health insurance because Medicare will take care of it.
Right. Particularly long-term care. A nursing home, that's Medicare. No. So you need to have answers to this. And the problem is you certainly don't think about Medicare when you're working.
Well, yeah, health insurance is a biggie. Again, it would be number 1 on my list because Medicare doesn't cover things like hearing aids, vision, dental. So you need the supplemental. There's costs involved. There's costs to Medicare, and people don't realize it. And we've talked before, if you retire before 65, huge healthcare expenses. Plus, even with Medicare, I've read people can spend upwards of $200,000 to $250,000 on healthcare in retirement. I read that, I see that number in a lot of different studies and articles that are out there. And so that's just, wow, that's a big one.
Yeah. And people, it's boring, right? Health insurance, and people don't like it, but I think it's definitely top 5. Got to get it addressed. And it could be one of those where you just address it early and then you're done, because it is one of those often set it and forget it. Things change over time health-wise and you can adjust, but it doesn't have to be this overwhelming thing. Bring in a Medicare or a health insurance expert to help you with this. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. Okay. Question 4 out of 5. We're almost there. When will you claim Social Security? I mean, I have probably 40 videos with you on Social Security. We're not going to go into it.
Yeah.
But that's a big decision. And again, people don't think about it until they have to. And the earliest people can take their own record is 62 if they're not disabled. So you don't think about it until your 60s. But it's a big decision, but it factors into the bigger, broader picture, which is what you were saying in the beginning, which is, what's your income plan? What is your income plan? When are you going to take Social Security? Where's your income going to come from? Which accounts? How much do you need? That goes back to question 2. And building some sort of income plan is a question you need to answer. So the question really is not only when will you claim Social Security, but where will your income come from and when?
Sure. So this is really 2 questions, but they tie together because Social Security is the foundation of retirement income for most people. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. You're right. That's exactly right. So start with Social Security because it's the foundation and it's the easier one to pick. You don't have many, you have a lot of choices, what are the 96 different months you can claim it. But if you've been married, divorced, widowed, all these things have implications with Social Security, but there's a set definite formula for Social Security, whereas the rest of your income need can come from anything. You can rent, you could buy dividend stocks, you can buy an annuity, you could loan, you could do a million things you could do. You can work. So having some sort of retirement income plan is important. And I guess the question is, where's your money going to come from? That's a biggie. And this is probably not the most difficult to solve, but for the average person, it's probably the most difficult. The difficult question is, how much do you live? How much does it cost do you live? That can be solved because it's up to you. How do you create income streams? That could be complex, and that's where you want to bring in.
That's up to you.
Yeah. But you have to answer.
That's where financial advisor comes in, because figuring that out on your own, there are mistakes you could make that will really cost you a lot of money. And people think, well, having a personal financial advisor has to be expensive. And it really isn't. I mean, you're very transparent about what it costs if someone becomes your client, and you can get advice up front at no cost. And then moving forward, you'll see the benefits. So I think it's
Mhm.
important. I encourage our listeners to give you a call with any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also work with a certified financial planner and just get a one-time income plan. Give me the plan, flat fee. I don't want an ongoing thing. Just give me the plan, and you could do that too and implement it. So it doesn't have to be a huge expense over time. Okay, last question, Tony, that you need to be able to ask is how are you going to position your assets? And this is where most people think financial people start, and this is, the only thing they do. How do I invest my money? Where do I put it? How do I get the best return? So on and so forth. But that's not really the question here. The question is, well, how do you want to position your assets to help with all the other questions that you just answered? Where are you going to live? How much, I'm thinking about retiring and moving. Okay, so you got to make sure you position your assets so you have money to pay for that down payment. Don't lock it up somewhere where you
Right.
can't get access. How much do you need to live? I need $5,000 a month. All right, so you got to position your assets so it generates $5,000 a month. Unless you could just pull money from the bank and live forever, not run out. How are you going to get insurance? What are your insurance costs? Well, we got to make sure that I have enough money to pay for that. I've got to position my assets to generate the income in the question 4. I need this much. I'm going to turn Social Security on at 70. Okay, well, what are you going to do between 62 and 70? You got to position your assets to be able to give you the income you need to delay Social Security, or vice versa. So this question is multifaceted. It's how are you going to position your assets? There's no right answer here. But the goal of positioning your assets isn't to get the best return, which is what most people do their whole lives. I want to do better than the market. Yeah, you do, but once you retire, it's not about returns, it's about income. It's about keeping what you have and not running out. So positioning assets it's a very different question when you are thinking about it in terms of retirement versus working.
Yeah, and asset allocation is a biggie. And I don't know, I don't know if we've talked about, I mean, we talk on the show about asset allocation, but specifically, I think we should do a whole show on just asset allocation and why it's important again as a refresher, because that is so key. And that's something that the average person, I don't feel, even if they think, oh, I invest in stocks, I keep up with finances. I just think that they're so used to the accumulation phase that, like you said, it's not about growth and accumulation anymore. It's about income and how will I have enough income and make that income last as long
Right.
as I do. So that's the trick. And I think to make sure you can pull that off, you need to be a really, really good person to be able to pull that one off. That's a big stunt to pull off. And I don't think most people can't do it successfully by themselves without a financial advisor these days. It's not like it used to be because it gets so complex.
Or most people don't have enough to just kind of let it ride. They don't have enough to just take the 4% rule. They it's too risky that way. Or they just fear that unknown. So you really can't answer this question until you answer the others. You got to know, what do you need to live? Where are you going to live? How much you spend? How much income you need? And then you could position your assets.
Yeah.
Um,
There's,
that's the
yeah.
hard part, is you got to answer the other ones first. And then positioning your assets is a matter of, well, how much do I need and how much risk do I really want? How much can I afford? What's my capacity for risk? What's my tolerance for risk? Two different questions. But again, it's an easy answer if you know the other ones.
Yeah.
I know
Well,
it
that's
sounds
true.
intimidating. I don't know. Should I buy stocks or bonds, or should I buy this annuity? I heard they were bad, or should I put it in bank? How much should I have in the bank? Like, those questions are almost impossible to answer if you don't know what the other questions answers are.
So that's why you put this one last, so that I like that you answer the others first. But I think you've missed out. I think there's a couple of questions that should be added on. I thought there would be one about taxes.
Yeah, I thought about that.
How much taxes will I pay in retirement would be number 6. And I would add, for me personally, number 7, how much pizza can I eat in retirement? And
Well,
I think that's one of the top retirement questions you can ask. Well, I should say me. This is me personally. This isn't for the listeners. I want to know how much pizza I will be able to eat in retirement. How much can I afford to eat? And as my financial advisor, I will come to you with that question.
but again, Tony, that the pizza one is answered in question 2. How will you live? What cost
That's
of your
true.
retirement
That's
lifestyle? So if you like, I
yes.
want decadent pizza, I want deep dish
Yeah.
on Mondays and thin crust on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Like that's part of your retirement lifestyle.
Sure.
But you did bring up one that was interesting, the taxes, which is
Yes.
I thought about that, and here's the answer to that. There's no question about taxes. There's no one of the top 5 is not, well, how much taxes will I pay? I think taxes permeates every other question. Where are you going to live? All the reasons why, your kids, so on. Taxes could be part of that. I want to
Sure.
live in Florida because there's no income tax state.
Okay.
How am I going to live? And also when am I going to claim, how much income I'm going to claim, how much income I'm going to take? Well, knowing the tax brackets is very helpful, because if you go above a certain amount and all of a sudden your Social Security tax is up, your tax bracket is the next one. So, and then how are you going to position your assets? Do you want to have it in an IRA? Do you want to do a Roth? Do you want to have a conversion? Do you want to invest for long-term capital gains, short-term capital gains? So taxes is a factor in all the others. But
Good
the reason
answer.
why
That's
I don't
true.
want that as a separate question, even though taxes may be your biggest expense in your life, the reason I don't have it as a separate question, because I don't like the tax tail wagging the lifestyle dog. I think
Sure.
you don't want to start with taxes and work your way into it. That's just not a good way to live. It's like when
I think you make a good point. The tax question is answered as you answer those other questions. That answers the tax question. That dictates how much taxes you pay. Where you live, property taxes, state taxes are affected. Where your assets are, that affects how much taxes you'll pay. If you have an IRA and a 401k and traditional, you're going to pay those taxes in retirement. If you have a Roth and a cash value life insurance that you can get money from, those are tax-free options. So you're right. My question, you proved me wrong on that one, Dan, because I thought it should be a separate question, but you're right. It really is answered with the other 5 questions.
You broke up for a minute. Did you say I did what? I proved what? You proved.
Yeah, I don't remember what I said there.
I did hear it, actually. You said I proved you wrong, which is definitely music to my ears. So to conclude, Tony, retirement's filled with a million decisions, and it's overwhelming. Oh, I didn't think about the taxes. And then Tony just brought that up. Oh my gosh, all right. And so people can get overwhelmed. It's easier if you take a systematic approach and just start with these 5. I don't think that the average person can have a successful retirement if they can't answer these 5 questions. Now, unless they have a lot of money and they just don't care, right? And then you just, right. But they might be wasteful or inefficient. So I think answering these top 5 questions in that order, roughly, is a good way to start. And if you could do that, then you're set. If you can't do it, it's either time to sit down and sharpen the pencil, or bring in an expert, or really take the time to think about it. Because if you ignore one of these, it will probably come back to bite you later if you haven't thought about it.
Good point. I can't disagree with that one, Dan.
All right. Well, thanks for a good show, Tony. And I appreciate the levity and the humor. And I do want to say, yes, Tony and I try and have fun with this. And if we didn't, I don't think we could do the show every week. It's just, it would be too boring. And no offense to myself and the financial advisory world, but if all we did was talk numbers, it wouldn't be fun. So Tony and I have a good relationship. We try and have fun. Hey, that's what makes him show up every week.
Yes.
Plus my good looks, right?
Good looks
Tony,
and charm, Dan, is what you've got going
good
for
show.
you.
I'll catch you all next week.
All matters discussed in today's show are for informational purposes only.
This show is not investment advice.
Dan Riddle nor Dolphin Financial Group are affiliated or endorsed by any government agency.
Investment advisory services are offered through Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc., a registered investment advisor in the state of Florida.
Insurance products and services are offered through Dolphin Insurance, Inc.
Dolphin Wealth Management Inc. and Dolphin Insurance Inc. are affiliated companies doing businesses as Dolphin Financial Group.
You should talk to someone at Dolphin Financial Group before implementing any of these strategies or ideas.